Welcome to Great Aspirations, WellSpire Advisors podcast series on life, wellness, and financial advice. Each episode shares the experiences of extraordinary people whose stories inspire others to think big, find balance, and explore the possibilities of achieving health, wealth, and happiness. And now, here's your host, the CEO of WellSpire Advisors, Michael LaMena.
Well, welcome to Season 3 of WellSpire's podcast, Great Aspirations. Season 3, our topic is Life Amplified, and we will be highlighting the amazing stories and journeys of many of the clients that we've been able to intersect with. These are human, real stories, which I know our audience is going to love. And I have the distinct pleasure for Episode 1 of welcoming Abbott Stillman as my guest. Welcome, Abbott.
Thank you, Mike.
As a little bit of background on Abbott, he's had an amazing journey, and I hope today we'll get into aspects of it. But Abbott Stillman started and had built a very successful career as a real estate developer and venture investor based in New York, but having done business in numerous cities in the U.S. and the globe: Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, Princeton, Chicago, San Francisco, China, areas in China, Munich, Mumbai. Some of the buildings, just to give you a flavor of the kind of real estate development that Abbott was involved in, impressive buildings in New York, like developing 3 Lincoln Center, a 1 million square foot mixed-use building that included a 60-story high condominium tower, the Juilliard School dorms, Lincoln Center Film Society Theater, and much more. He created one of the nation's first data centers. When we think about how prevalent they are in society today with everything going on with AI, he was on the bleeding edge, blazing a trail, establishing one of the first data centers by redeveloping a 1.4 million square foot industrial warehouse building in Philadelphia. In Washington, D.C., he created a 400,000 square foot office building in which he collaborated on an electronic art installation that was selected as one of the 75 best designs created in this country for the Cooper Hewitt Museum Triennial. After real estate, an extremely successful career in real estate, Abbott also took on a second career as a venture investor with involvement in over 20 companies and was the chairman CEO of a tech company based in Silicon Valley. If that wasn't enough, throughout his career with all this commercial success, Abbott was also doing a lot of painting on the personal side, though I think your work was never intended to be shown outside of family and friends, correct?
That's right.
Well, things have changed. That changed when a Soho gallerist and dealer was induced by one of Abbott's friends to come to his studio, take a look in the spring of 2023 at some of his paintings. By August, Abbott was a featured artist in Urban Summer, a group show, and had 4 of his 6 paintings sold prior to the opening. So again, success has been a common thread throughout all this, whether it's real estate, the world of technology in Silicon Valley, or now as a professional artist. I'm excited today to talk about this journey you've been on.
Well, it's been quite a journey, I will say that. I've had a lot of good fortune and a lot of people who helped me along the way. No question about it.
That's great. So let's go back to the beginning. Real estate was kind of the first chapter of an unbelievable career journey. How did you first get involved in that? Where were the seeds planted that ultimately led you to real estate?
It was a circuitous journey. First of all, my grandfather, who was first-generation immigrant to America, was a carpenter who did a little bit of building in the Bronx. So there was some real estate in my family. But I had no interest in it whatsoever. Graduated from college, had no idea what to do. Went to law school, like a lot of people who don't know what else to do. Did pretty well in law school, but decided I don't want to be a lawyer. My junior year in college, I convinced my school to allow me to spend a large part of the year hitchhiking through Europe. And while I was there, I got very interested in city design. If you spend time in the old European cities and you start to recognize the shapes of plazas and going from a plaza to an alley and then expanding outward, and the whole idea of how you have people move through a city was very interesting to me. But still, I didn't think about real estate. So I wound up, after I decided not to be a lawyer, I wound up being admitted to MIT to study in their School of Architecture and City Planning. And I was fortunate enough to be given a fantastic fellowship that allowed me to go to school without paying for it, and also gave me a fairly substantial stipend in exchange for teaching at MIT and Harvard. And that was a great deal of fun. And I had every intention of becoming an architect and thought, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And was working hard at MIT. And then at some point, a couple of my professors, a couple of whom were quite well known, as a matter of fact, started complaining that they were very upset that their buildings got altered by the damned developers who were signing the checks. One day I was sitting in a design class and one of them was grumbling about it and the light bulb went off. I said, I think I want to be that guy. If that's the person who's deciding what the building looks like, that's who I want to be. So as I was getting ready to graduate, I sent out probably 100 resumes. Didn't get a single response. People didn't even bother saying, we don't want you. There was just dead silence. And fortunately for me, a friend of mine was being recruited by this company that nobody around me had ever heard of, the Seapines Company in South Carolina on Hilton Head. And he said, you ought to get in touch with them. So I did. And soon thereafter, my wife and I were on an island in the middle of the ocean in South Carolina with the rain pouring down and are saying, what the heck are we doing here? In the end, it was the only job I was offered, so I took it and wound up having a wonderful, wonderful couple of years working for that company, including doing a lot of the development design for Kiowa Island, which is one of the really good resorts in the United States. Got island fever, went out to California and got a job. One of the risks that I took, everybody told us, oh, you can't go to San Francisco unless you have housing and you have a job. You'll never get either one. We had neither. We went out there, and within 3 days, my wife had seen a for rent sign on a townhouse in Pacific Heights where the owner was looking for someone to take care of his orchids. And we said, we can do that. Of course, we had no idea what we were talking about, but we did it anyway. And I got hired as the vice president of development for a company that was doing a building in San Francisco and a resort down the coast.
So let's if we can pause there for a second. I just want to unpack that a little bit, because everybody sees the success, and when you actually delve back, there was uncertainty. Didn't know exactly what you wanted to do, but you had experience, right? Traveling, and that through some elements of chance, but also reflection, led you to a great academic program. You had the light bulb go off that said, well, actually, I don't want to design beautiful things and then have somebody else have control over it. Talk to me a little bit more about aspects of that, because I think sometimes people get worried. My middle daughter just graduated this weekend and from high school, so there's a lot of focus on, well, what are you going to do? What school are you going to go to? What do you want to study? And there is an aspect of like embracing like the uncertainty, having experiences, but then being able to reflect and respond to stimuli in your journey.
Very much so. I think if I had to say what the characteristics are that have served me best, one would be a strong ability to live with ambiguity, to know that nothing is certain in life, to know that it's okay to follow a path, see where it leads. It might lead you to something you love. It might not. If it doesn't,
and take some risk, right? Because
that's right.
You shared like moving to South Carolina, going to the West Coast. Like those weren't risk-free propositions. But if you're not willing to embrace a little ambiguity, you're not going to do that.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's absolutely right. I was very fortunate in that my dad, who was my hero, once said to me, once you get out of school, you're on your own, but there's always a bed here for you. So I always had the feeling that if everything fell apart, I could always go home. And that feeling of security definitely made a difference.
What a great statement for your father to make, because he's giving you empowerment and license to kind of chart your own journey, but at the same time letting you know, like, look, if you run into rough times or there's failure, we're here. There's
Right.
always a place.
No, that's right.
Awesome.
It meant the world to me. Ironically, a few years later, when I left law school, I had done very well, and my father was not happy at all, and he literally stopped talking to me for about a year. It was funny. I'd call up, and my mother would get on the phone, and I'd hear her saying, "Ab's on the phone. You want to talk to him?" No. So he gave me the security, but he also he could be a tough guy. I think the other thing is I always and I've always felt this way. When I was at MIT, my wife and I lived in a very, very small one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge. We were happy as could be. And from that point on, my attitude was I was happy then. If everything falls apart and we had to wind up back in a small one-bedroom apartment, I think we'd be happy then as well. So the idea that taking some financial risks was a dangerous thing didn't really occur to me. I had lots of friends who all along the way said to me, "We don't understand how you take these risks. We couldn't sleep at night." And I'd say, well, there's always the chance you're going to be wrong, and if I lose investors' money, or I'm afraid I'm going to lose investors' money, I don't sleep too well. But as far as my money's concerned, I never worry about it. It's
confidence in what matters
okay.
most, which is family.
Yeah, that's right.
That makes sense. So you're on the West Coast. Talk to me about how that bridges to some of these incredible buildings you've built.
Well, one day I woke up and said I miss New York. My wife was doing a independent film then, and I said I'd really like to move back. She grew up in Kansas, had always wanted to live in San Francisco and New York. So she said, "Okay, we'll
tick
move
the box
back
for San Francisco.
Yeah,
there's the opportunity to get to New York.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we moved to New York. I got a job relatively quickly working for the Levitt Company, and I was responsible for their Chicago region. But after a while, that was not of much interest, and I said to her, I want to go out on my own and build a real estate company. And she was working for NBC at the time as a political analyst, and later as one of the producers of the Today Show. And she said, "Okay, if that's what you want to do, go for it." So I did. Spent 3 years without making a nickel trying to find my first project. And we lived off her salary in New York. So when my kids now sometimes say, "Well, Dad, you created all this," I say, "Well, not really. It was a partnership. If it hadn't been for your mother saying that she was willing to support us for 3 years, I don't know where I'd be."
And embracing that risk, right?
Exactly.
And you guys had already done that, moved a couple
Yeah.
different locations, taken on uncertainty.
Yeah,
so
that's
it
right.
sounds like you guys have an amazing partnership, and I agree, you got to be aligned, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're not aligned in taking that risk together.
Yeah, no, I was very lucky. She's always been extremely supportive. To this day, when big financial decisions come up, many of which are with you guys, she always says, "Whatever you think, I trust you. Things have gone really well, so don't just inform me, but don't worry about whether I'm going to disagree or not." So we moved back. I desperately looked for something to do. I did a lot of research and fortunately found that in Washington, D.C., there had been two things that had happened. Number one, this was 1976 and 77. We were coming out of a recession. And also in 68, there'd been the riots after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And everything east of 15th Street in downtown Washington, D.C. had either had their windows smashed or the buildings burned. And the thought in D.C. was anybody building east of 15th Street is out of his mind. And I looked and said, okay, the metro system is under construction. It's going to be open in a year. The vacancy rate looks like it's going to be roughly 1%. People are going to have no choice. They're going to have to go further east than they wanted to. The best parallel I can think of in New York is Hudson Yards, where when Hudson Yards was conceived, most people said, nobody's going there. It's way too far west. So, the conventional wisdom is usually wrong. It's just a question of timing. You have to figure out what the timing is.
Timing and having the conviction to be able to see opportunity where other people see risk or obstacles.
Now, the problem I had was I was young, 28 years old, and had a net worth of about $10,000. And went around to a lot of financial institutions and said, I want to do this building. There's a market for this office building on Vermont Avenue. And I got 50 responses ranging from no to, you've got to be kidding me. I kept going. The 51st one, I walked into the offices of New York Life in Washington, and the head of their regional office was 28 years old. And he said, you know what? Nobody thinks guys our age can do this kind of stuff. We're going to back you.
Wow.
So with that, back in those days, you had to get a commitment, a permanent commitment for a loan, and then you went and got a construction loan based on the permanent commitment taking out the construction loan. So once I had the permanent commitment, we were in pretty good shape, and went out to Chicago, got the First National Bank of Chicago to give us a loan, and then got one of the fortunate things that have happened to me, and anybody who's been successful will, if they're at all intelligent, will admit that luck is always part of the equation. First National Bank of Chicago said, we want to have a minimum interest rate that we're going to get on this loan. We want at least 4.5%. And I said, okay, but if I'm going to give you that, I want a cap of 7%. And they said, okay. And then Paul Volcker showed up. And short-term interest rates went up to 21% on construction loans. Everybody who was trying to build against me was paying those rates.
Exponentially.
And I had bought the site that I bought. It was actually made it into a joint venture with people who owned a garage on it for a cost, because nobody wanted it, where the rents that wound up being paid at the time that our building was opened were equal to what my entire cost per square foot was for the building. So obviously it turned into a huge success. And my career sort of went from there. After that, I wound up doing a partnership with Princeton University to build a building for them. I wound up building an awful lot of stuff in the Boston area, single-family houses and condominiums. Did the Lincoln Center project, which was a very interesting process. The Lincoln Center invited 22 development companies, including every nationally known development company, to compete for the site, and I wound up getting it, and it was an incredible process because we had to create two separate condominiums, one for the part of the building we were selling to Lincoln Center, one for the tower that was above it, another one for the Juilliard Tower, which is, I think, the nicest dormitory any college students have in the United States. And we had to actually create some legal precedents that nobody had used before, where we took the we had to create easements through the building for the structural support towers and things like that. And actually, my MIT education came in very handy because I'd taken some structure courses. And
Well, and I'm sure your legal background as well. when
that
you start
helped
to
also,
navigate.
yeah.
I mean, I love those stories where you kind of have these experiences and you don't know where they're going to show
Yeah.
up, but it's all kind of part of the fabric.
No,
right?
that's absolutely right. And we did a few things that I was very proud of. We took a 60-story tower and moved the original design, had it closer to the core of Lincoln Center, and we reversed it and took the smaller tower and made it closer, and the bigger tower and made it further away, so it was less imposing if you're in the plaza at Lincoln Center, because we felt, going back to my days of hitching around Europe, I think the Lincoln Center Plaza and then the area over near the theater is one of the best public spaces in New York. Really extraordinary. Made more so now that they got Diller Scofidio to redesign the whole area and get it closer to the street, which they're going to continue to do, by the way. They're redoing the west side of Lincoln Center to integrate it more with the neighborhood now.
I love that in the design, you're thinking about the experience, and it harkens back to you backpacking in Europe and seeing different cities and the way they're laid out. So tremendous success on the commercial real estate side.
Not every time.
Sure.
As a developer, that you're going to take some hits because you
part of the game,
decide
right?
to do a building, and you're going to have it finished 3 years later. And the Federal Reserve can kill you, the market can kill you, a lot of things can kill you. And you just have to be willing to take the risk and try to control your downside risks to the extent that you can.
That makes sense. Not for the faint of heart, right?
Yeah, definitely not for the faint of heart.
So that's Act One
Yeah.
commercially.
Right.
Now, how does one pivot from you're extremely successful in the real estate world? Yes, you're going to have successes. You're going to have more challenging projects, but in aggregate, objectively, tremendous success in commercial real estate. How do you pivot to Silicon Valley, tech startups?
Well,
talk to me about that transition.
Okay, that was interesting because I'm naturally curious. And one of the reasons I got involved in venture investing was, number one, I had the resources to do it because I'd done well in real estate. And number two, I really enjoyed learning about new technologies that I didn't necessarily know that much about before I started to investigate them. Number three, I had great connections up at MIT, so access to some of the best tech minds in the world. And number four, to some extent, I started doing it for the same reason I started doing some painting, as a way of having something else to do rather than feeling I had to keep creating buildings no matter what. I have an incredible urge to create. And creating buildings for me was the game. It wasn't really about the money. It was I liked the fact that you have the discipline that you had to be successful in the market because you had investors who were in it because they wanted to make money. They didn't care whether you won an AIA award or something like that. They just said, I'm putting my money in, I trust you, I want to do well.
It's a financial outcome.
Yeah,
right?
so, but that creates limits on you. You can't decide, well, I'm going to make a building where I don't care what the costs are or anything like that. And actually within those limitations is beauty. And I thought that it was helpful, frankly. Very much like, when you're doing a piece of art, the canvas is a limitation. There's a limit to what you can do. Anyway, the things that I really loved about the venture world were I was learning about something new. I was helping, in most instances, backing people who were relatively young, who I thought had good ideas and were very eager and resilient, which was what I had been when I was young. It was a fantastic experience. Now, the way I wound up running a Silicon Valley company was because of an unfortunate venture investment where I had put a significant amount of money into a company that was essentially, its major unique proposition were these extremely good optical devices that could be used for a variety of reasons. And a lot of people had followed me into it, friends, business acquaintances, stuff like that. And the company, the founder, was not up to the task, and the company was rapidly headed toward failure. And the board asked me to step in and become the executive chairman and the CEO. And I'd never run an operating company, and I thought, well, this is just a big mistake. and they said, well, we really think you're the right guy for it, so please do it. And frankly, looking back on it, I probably never should have said yes, because I wound up being bi-coastal, commuting almost every week out to California, spending 110-hour weeks because I was still running my real estate company at the same time and painting.
Wow.
And was talking to factory in China at 3 or 4 in the morning almost every day. It was crazy. But in the end, it was fulfilling, because a company that was really bankrupt when I took it over, it wound up recovering, and we sold it to Bosch, the German company, at the end of the 3 years, and made most of our money back. Not all of it, but most of it. Of course, the fact that we didn't make it all back led to a bunch of people telling me I hadn't done a good enough job. But I was actually pretty proud of the job I did.
It sounds like it was a great experience.
Yeah, it was. It was a very interesting experience.
So you started to bridge to, Act 3. So if Act 1 is real estate, Act 2 is being in the venture world, taking on an operating CEO chairman role for, really, it sounds like a turnaround story where a company was struggling. Act 3 is painting. You've now become a very successful artist. I know it's hard to sometimes describe what successful is, but commercially successful and unbelievable work that you've created. But that's not brand new. The seeds for Act 3 were present in Acts 1, Acts 2, probably even prior. Talk to me a little bit about that journey.
Okay. Well, when I was in graduate school at MIT, there was a fantastic Hungarian artist named György Kepes, who was at the school and was actually working on a project using some MIT technology to create a light bridge over the river in Cambridge. So the idea was to use LED lights in tubes to create this fantastic bridge over the Charles River. And people thought he was a madman, but he was great, and I absolutely loved him, and I got to know him. And he had been a representational artist at the early part of his career who switched to a abstract artist, thought that abstraction was definitely the way to go, and had then gone on and become sort of an abstract and conceptual artist. So in himself, he kind of embodied all three of the historical trends that were going on in the art world. So my exposure to him was actually pretty interesting, because I realized he's doing some really kind of exciting things. Then I started, when I was doing my development career, I was at least savvy enough to understand there are big cycles in the real estate business. And if you're doing something in the wrong cycle, you're going to lose a lot of money. And at the same time, I knew I wanted to create things. So I hit upon the idea of, look, I need to have a couple of years at a time where I'm not going to build a building. What am I going to do? I can't sit around. I like sports, but I don't want to just go out and play golf and tennis and all that. So I started painting.
Well, and you said you had this incredible desire to create, right?
Yeah. And I needed to.
So painting became an outlet for that?
Painting became an outlet for that, and a way of avoiding getting in trouble in the real estate business.
That's so interesting.
So it was a combination of the two, and I started out largely doing representational painting, portraits and still lifes. And then one day I was at MoMA, and I spent about 3 hours looking at the Cézannes, and went home and said, there's no point in doing representational painting after Cézanne. So I'm not doing that anymore. And I remembered what Kepish had said, and I said, I'm going to start doing abstract, and found that it allowed me to communicate the ideas I wanted to communicate far better. And I think I was okay as a representational artist, but nothing special at all. I think I'm a lot better as an abstract artist, and hopefully continuing to get better as time goes on. It's been decades that I've been working at it, and I'm pretty happy with where I am now, but never satisfied. So,
all makes sense. Tell me a little bit about the transition from using painting art as an outlet for your creative desire, but always intended to be kept close, right?
Yes.
Personal, maybe friends and family. Yeah. It's a big leap to start to say, well, now my work's going to be out in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be viewed as a real commercial artist. Like,
right.
talk to me about that transition, because it had to be incredibly exciting that people were interested in your work, that they saw value in it, but also a little bit intimidating to say, here's a whole creative outlet that's been personal to me.
Yeah.
It's been mine, and now I'm going to share it with the world.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because talking about taking risks by putting yourself out there, when you build a building, people may like the way it looks, may not like the way it looks, but if the building does well and serves the purposes of the people who buy or lease it, you can say that building is a success.
Yeah, there's a functional counterpart to the aesthetic aspect, right?
Exactly. When it comes to art, it's a whole different ballgame. And clearly, if you're the right kind of artist, you're in that piece of art. There's no avoiding it. So if people hate it, it's hard to convince yourself that to some extent they're not hating you. So it definitely, when you stand in front of a canvas, and I tend to work at a relatively big scale, it does take a certain amount of courage to start painting. And I was never indifferent to how people reacted to it. But when it was family and friends, I knew I was going to get the benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
So the difference between being an artist with a small a and an artist with a big A, which is where I am now, is you are exposing yourself to critics, to curators, to collectors, to all the people in the art world, which happens to be a world that can sometimes be, shall we say, arbitrary and capricious.
Sure.
There are many, many, many talented artists in the world who never get a chance to show their work, even though they're desperate to do so. I was fortunate that somebody gave me that opportunity, and since then, I've been lucky. I had a piece in a group show in Paris. I'm going to be in a group show in New York this fall. I more than likely am going to be have a painting at one of the auctions this fall, and I'm in the process of discussing the likelihood that the Bronx Museum is going to wind up taking one or more of my paintings into their permanent collection, which I'm literally a year into the professional art career. That just doesn't happen.
Sure.
I've been told by so many people in the world of art that what's happened for me is unique. And I recognize that a lot of it is lucky. You have to be good. Your work has to be really good, but you've also got to get noticed by the right people. You've got to get enough of a buzz in the art community that people will start talking about you and be interested in seeing your work. It's actually very, very hard. Most people who aren't in the art world don't understand. Very difficult to get somebody to even take the time to come and see your work. Most of the time, they're too busy. They've already got their posse of artists that they're interested in. They've got a lot of time and effort devoted to other artists, and it's extraordinary for a new artist to break through all that. So I've been very fortunate.
Like many overnight successes, it really wasn't overnight,
No,
right?
not at all.
The roots are deep in terms of
Right.
all of your commitment to that creative outlet.
Yeah.
But certainly, it's been a dramatic experience over the last
and I would say certainly I have to say that I am at a level of success that I'm delighted by, but I have a long way to go in the art world. It's the success. Literally, what I would like to have is the Whitney do a one-man show. I think I may have to wait a while for that. But
given your track record of success in real estate and venture investing, I wouldn't bet against you. But like one of the things that really resonates with me is throughout this conversation, a couple observations. One, incredible work ethic. You're passionate about what you do. You put all of yourself into it, no matter what it is. You can't have success without that. But you're also, humble and conscious of the fact that, chance and luck and other people have had a huge impact on your success. And I think that grounding is really exciting to see.
Yeah, that's true. And I have to say that over the last 20 some odd years, a part of that support has been support from your organization. I'm at the point now in my life where, with help from you guys, I'm now able to be comfortable and satisfied that I've taken care of my descendants so that they will, in a very uncertain world, at least have some financial security that is increasingly difficult for a lot of their generation to feel assured about. And that's been, a great comfort, and I think has freed me to, just essentially do what I want to do. And it's been part of being willing to take risks. I think one thing that's been interesting is I love the people, starting with Howard Sontag, who've been responsible for helping me here. I've always been more aggressive than they are, always. And
that's probably a healthy tension, right?
Right.
But I appreciate the kind words. I mean, we talk all the time internally about helping the individuals and families that we work with live their best lives. And I think you have an incredible story of, using the success you've had, partnering with a firm like us to build financial independence so you can continue to explore what your best life looks like and lean into things that you're passionate about, and at the same time build legacy and confidence in the next generation. And I think back to what you said in the very beginning, that your father's simple words around the fact that you're crafting your own life, but there's always, a place for you. You're providing that same support structure to empower the next generation to live their best lives through the success that you've had.
Well, I certainly hope so, because if somebody asked me, how would you describe your greatest success, I would immediately say as a father and grandfather. The rest of the stuff is great, no question about it, and I have had a lot of accomplishments that I'm very proud of, but nothing's more important than that. So,
well, I appreciate you saying that. We talk about it all the time. Like you can have all the financial outcomes. Many very wealthy people, it's not just about successful transition of wealth from Gen 1 to Gen 2 to Gen 3 from a tax perspective or things like that where technical expertise comes in, but it's about knowing that values and legacy and the continuity of family transcend across generations. So that means a lot. Unbelievable life, career. What advice would you give for other people that are earlier in their lives that they can take away from you? I mean, I've heard clearly being willing to take some risk, right? To work hard and be passionate about the things that you're involved in. What else would you share?
Well, I'd add, I think I said before, but I'm a great believer in there's always uncertainty. So waiting to decide that a path is exactly the right one for you is a mistake. Head down a path that seems interesting, but be willing to walk away from it if it's not. I think that's been one of the really, really huge advantages for me. Is I actually, my wife at one point said to me, "Boy, you're a world-class quitter," and that's true. I quit law school. I quit a number of jobs. I stopped doing some things that I was really good at doing because I wanted to do other things. I really think that it's very, very important to pursue something that you consider interesting, pursue it to the point where you think that you have figured it out, and decide whether that is the thing you want to expend your passions on. And if it is, great. If it isn't, then find something else to do, and don't be afraid of heading in another direction. I think so many people, including many of my friends who are now retired, when they look back, they say, there were other things I wanted to do, but there was always that fear that if I gave up what I was doing, it was going to be something I couldn't go back to. And
isn't it ironic that people have success and they get to a point sometimes where they become trapped with the success they're having and the path they're on? They actually have the means to try and explore different things, but they get locked into this linear progression. We have 27 interns this summer, and I was just speaking with them, and I said, I see too many people, especially early in their careers, feel like I have to be on a linear progression. I have to go from this job to this promotion to this title, and they stop being intellectually curious and stop being open to possibilities that are tangential or vary from the kind of path they're on.
Yeah, no, I know. I'll go back. The dean of Columbia Law School at the time that I was there was Mike Sovereign, who became the Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration. And I did very well my first year in law school. Most people hate their first year of law school. I thought it was just a logic exam, and I was good at it. So I did extremely well. But I was in a summer program that the ACLU sponsored, where I was in 3 different kinds of settings as a lawyer: one in the criminal courts, one in a corporate firm, and one with a civil liberties firm. The theory being I'd love the civil liberties and would become a civil liberties lawyer, which is what I thought I wanted to do at the time. And I spent the summer, and I literally hated all 3 of them, particularly the civil liberties one, because I was with a firm where the 2 partners were burned out civil rights lawyers who said there is no justice in America. This is a terrible way to spend your life, blah, blah, blah. I decided this is not for me. So I said, I'm leaving law school. So Mike Sovereign, who was the dean, insisted that I had to come to see him because he wouldn't accept my resignation unless I came to see him. And I sat in his office, and he said, you understand, given how you did in your first year in law school, there's a chance you could become a Supreme Court justice. And I looked at him and said, this just isn't for me. I just, first of all, the odds of that happening are infinitesimal. But even if they were to happen, this isn't the way I want to spend my life. So that was part of the reason my father was not particularly pleased with me. He thought, God, you've got this wonderful career ahead of you. Why would you walk away from it?
But it is your life. And when we think about
that's exactly right.
This season is about life amplified, and amplification comes with, the source of it is going to be passion. And I think throughout your life in the various stages of your career, you've listened to your heart and your mind, and you've been open to new possibilities. You've taken risk, and what an amazing journey.
Well, it's been fun. I will say that. I think that. It is a journey, and when I look back on it, I have to confess I sometimes say, "Who was that guy?" It almost seems like I've lived multiple lives, but I've gotten to a spot where I'm really very pleased, and I'm certainly determined to build this career as far as it'll go.
We can't wait to continue to be on that journey with you. Congrats on all your success, and thanks for joining us for the podcast and giving us a little bit of insight into what's been an amazing career and amazing life.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Abbott.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Great Aspirations, presented by WealthSpire Advisors, a registered investment advisor and subsidiary company of NFP Corp. If you have feedback, including suggestions for future topics and guests, contact us at clientrelations@wealthspire.com.